Welcome back to another edition of Forecast Lab. Yesterday in Dallas-Fort Worth, it was a busy, severe weather day. You can see the supercell moving into western Fort Worth near Carswell. And as it approached the downtown area, we had a tornado warning. Let's zoom in on that cell. I might want to get rid of some of these street patterns. Let me drop that real quick. And there we can see what looks like a hook very close to downtown Fort Worth. However, we take a look at the storm relative velocity, and it was a little bit disorganized. The radar is down to the south. These are going to be inbounds, and these are going to be outbounds. And we're looking at about 27 outbound and 43 inbound, and it's spread out over a couple of miles. There wasn't a whole lot of contraction of that velocity field, and you can see as it moves out to the east, just not much organization. But let me take you back through the rest of this. We'll go back to the reflectivity. And you can see it tracking eastward across the mid-cities. It seems to pick up a little bit around Irving. Had what looked like a little debris ball almost. However, storm relative velocity, we take a look at that, and it did look a little bit stronger there. Looking at 44 out and 23 in, that's about 60 knots across maybe half a mile. They did not immediately put out a tornado warning, so presumably they had a lot of visibility on this storm, spotters out, that kind of thing, and I guess the visual indications just weren't there. But they did put a tornado warning out eventually, and you can see that moved eastward across North Dallas. And that's how the severe reports looked yesterday. If we had tornadoes, there would be red in there, but most of what we have across Dallas-Fort Worth was wind and hail. Most of the severe risks have moved into the Florida Panhandle, southeastern Alabama, and parts of Georgia ahead of this MCS. Very rainy, and that's along a cold front that extends all the way down from the Great Lakes and into the Gulf of Mexico. That's a look at the current situation. Occluded front from the Great Lakes all the way down through the Appalachians. And it appeared to me that there was some cold air damming. You can see this region of fog from the Blue Ridge Mountains up to West Virginia. And temperatures a little bit cooler in the 50s compared to near 70 out in the plains of the Carolinas. And the warm front appears to be up there near the Delmarva. North of that, rainy, temperatures in the 30s and 40s. And then, of course, down there in the Gulf Coast region, there's that large MCS tracking eastward. And ahead of that, dew points running about 60 degrees. There's the Mobile, Alabama radar, the Gulf of Mexico down to the south. There's Florida and Pensacola right about here. And it does look non-severe. And why is that? Well, when we zoom in, there's not much of a gradient from high intensities to low intensities. Kind of a gradual transition along the leading edge, and also the intensities themselves are not that high, only looking at about maybe about 50 dBz's in the cores. And yesterday in Dallas-Fort Worth we were seeing 70 to 75 dBz easily. Quite an extensive trailing stratiform region all the way back towards Jackson, Mississippi. And then further up north, we get out of range of the Mobile radar. And that's how it looks around Birmingham, Alabama, even weaker. Very disorganized, and even on the leading edge, just not really seeing very much. And they are not really coupled very well with the moisture field. So the Birmingham radar located right there, that area of rain we looked at there. And the flow is highly veered out there in the warm sector. The warm sector is where we have these temperatures in the 70s. Looks like the leading edge is right about there, just south of Columbus, Georgia, and dew points there not very impressive. There are a few 60s further up north, but that could be coming from some of the precip. Don't really know that for sure. In the wake of this front, there is cold northwesterly flow. Temperatures up there in the Dakotas close to zero, 4 degrees out there east of Bismarck, and you can see that that is about the same temperature as up there in northern Manitoba. And the thickness pattern, there's the 507 decameter thickness pattern. It paints out this, I think I lost it there. Yeah, it paints out a circle. So this is a pool of cold air that is broken off from the polar vortex there and is heading southeast. And it is modifying rapidly. Nevertheless, that means a cold start to the weekend. Snow showers back there in New Mexico. And there's one of the pictures there off Twitter from Joshua Spear. That's on one of the interstates there in New Mexico, showing some traffic problems. And you can see what it looked like a few hours ago in different areas of northern New Mexico. However, the dominant feature is this strong ridge coming out of Canada into the Texas Panhandle, and one lobe of that located in the Great Basin area. So this is the big triangle of high pressure, and that represents a large pool of cold air that's settled in across the Rocky Mountains. The eastern fringes of that supporting that northwesterly flow. In the middle of that, just kind of variable. The wind's not too strong except up there in Wyoming. And across Arizona and Nevada, wind starting to come around to the west. That's very similar to the return flow pattern we often see in Texas as the ridge passes to the east. And what is this? California, no big winter weather system. Well, something seems wrong there. Well, we're going to look at the data a little bit later because they are going to be getting more of that. Let's take a look at Alaska. Some fair weather showing up there in southeastern Alaska. A beautiful low-resolution morning on some of the cameras, but yeah, sun breaking out and not seeing much snow down in the lower elevations. There's Wrangell, Alaska. Looks beautiful. Heading into spring, I guess. And the temperatures definitely reflect that in southern Yukon, coming up to 30s. Haven't seen that in a long time. And even in southern Northwest Territories, 30 degrees there. But there is a front, and north of that, very cold air in place. Still looking at sub-zero conditions in the Alaskan interior. In far northern Canada, not much going on. Still looking at minus 20s. And even on Banks Island right there, minus 40. So that Arctic air is still in place. And we drop on south and get back into that baroclinic weather system in the Great Lakes, although it is transitioning to barotropic. That's an occlusion, and that's going to be heading into the big low-pressure graveyard located near Baffin Island. So probably the weather starting to go downhill once again in Labrador and Quebec. And we've made the grand tour. Let's take a look at the AWIPS charts. 250 millibars up near 34,000 feet. I'm aware some of our viewers probably find this a little bit boring, but to us meteorologists, this is very important. This is the steering flow, for one, and we can see every major quasi-geostrophic disturbance upstream that could affect our weather here in the U.S. So definitely a lot to look at. And what we see here is a zonal flow pattern across the Pacific. It looks like we're back into a positive EPO pattern. We've sort of broken down some of that ridging in the Alaskan region. I think a couple days ago we had that big old ridge up into Anchorage, but now low pressure, low heights out there around the Aleutians. Definitely some troughing in the central U.S. with that cold air advection coming down from Canada, and ridging out west where we've got warm air advection working up the east coast. And there's our polar front jet running from about Dallas up to Pittsburgh and Boston. So some of the stronger upper air energy, the lift, probably going to be focusing on southern Ontario and around Montreal and New England. And likewise, the right rear quadrant out here in Texas, and that's the reason we're hanging on to some of that cloud cover. And there it is. We had rain at Houston just a couple hours ago, and still extensive cloud cover back into the Rio Grande and out into Old Mexico. Some of this right here along the Texas coast, let me give you a closer look at that. Yeah, do you see what's going on here? Some of these bands, they have an appearance of moving north to south. That is a visualization of the modification of the air mass. very, very cold air picking up heat from the ground and especially from the waters off the Texas coast. And as a result, we get those bands of stratus, stratocumulus, and even cumulus. And they form these streets that line up all the way out into the Gulf Coast waters. So we can drop a sounding out around Galveston, maybe just a little bit inland, so we don't get some of those effects from the ocean. And what you see here is very strong cold air advection, especially in that level right about there, where the profile is coldest, where it drops to about 3 to 4 Celsius. And you can see in the wind profile that that is a northerly flow. If you want to also look at the hodograph, you can see 0 kilometers right there, 1 kilometer right there. That's indicating a north to south flow. And gradually, as you get up to 2 kilometers, that becomes much more westerly. So at those levels, we're getting above the cold air mass. This part of the hodograph, that's going to be part of the cold Canadian air working southward. So if you want to see what the weather's going to do, just go to the 500 millibar heights and vorticity. So starting out, we've got this occlusion up to the north. It's very close to the low pressure area at the surface, which I think was right around here, and it stacks almost vertically with height, so that indicates that it is a cold core system. Now, heading forward into the weekend, we see ridging starting to build into the western U.S. and the Rockies. On the west coast, though, another trough heading towards California, so the weather going downhill once again. This is a zone of upper level lift, which is going to be mostly in the northern half of California. And that'll work onshore, probably some showers with that, Saturday and Sunday, and then unsettled in the Rockies during the weekend and into early next week. We can see this shortwave right here. This is going to be Monday morning. Where did that come from? Let's go back. Yeah, that's going to be this feature right here, diving south Saturday morning or Sunday morning. And that came out of Canada, and it rounded that trough. And as that comes south, probably going to bring some clouds, although I think the air mass is a little bit too dry to support any extensive precip. Then as we go into next week, we see zonal flow conditions going downhill out there in Nevada for Monday. That looks like another disturbance. Yeah, there's 1, and then there's 2, which seems a little bit stronger. And I can see 3. That looks even stronger. So here we go again. More rain for California early next week. And fast jet stream dynamics. That's going to be the polar front jet moving into southern California. Well, here we go again. Got to look at the IVT values. So let's bring that forward into the weekend. Another atmospheric river coming into California. This looks a little bit weaker than what we had last week, only seeing values of about 300 to 400, mostly affecting the central California coast, some of that grazing Los Angeles. And this is our next shot on Monday. Those values coming well inland. Looks like only about 250, 300, 400. So probably some heavy precipitation, but it will be rather localized compared to last week, and not much of an effect on the Sierra Nevadas, although I'm sure they'll get some. It's not a big fire hose coming into the San Joaquin Valley. And there we go. There's Tuesday. Now that's a pretty strong fetch coming into Arizona. IVT values up to 5 to 600. So some fairly significant precip possible in Phoenix, Tucson, and the Mogollon Rim. And I'm not sure if it's going to be cold enough for snow in Flagstaff, but they'll likely get some of that as well. And let's run the NAM forecast. This is where we're at right now. The cold air mass located there in Minnesota. We're looking at the 1,000 through 700 millibar thickness in red. And we can also assess the advection. And that's where you get these boxes formed between the thickness and the pressure lines. The smaller the box, the stronger the advection. So that tells us that there is some strong cold air advection about like that. And the higher values, well, let me finish this first. Yeah, that cold air advection is all the way down to Texas and back behind the front. So the strongest values are going to be right in here. and that's helping to support some of those snow showers they've got going on in Nebraska right now. If we look at the 500 millibar heights and vorticity, this is going to be for 7 p.m. We back that up to 1 p.m. And certainly some strong upper level lift in this area here. The snow showers mostly back here in Nebraska. We should be able to support them in places like Chicago, Quad Cities, Des Moines, but we don't have that. So let's take a look at the forecast skew-t's. And there we go. We'll set this on Grand Island, and we take a look at that. And yeah, look at those steep lapse rates all the way up to 12,000 feet. Doesn't take much moisture to get snow showers going in this kind of profile. This is basically a cold inverted V skew-t. Yeah, look at that. Snow showers. Let's see, look at the truck shadow right there. This is on Interstate 80. This is going to be looking east. So these are these northwest to southeast bands forming up these spectacular streets, and there's the snow showers off in the distance. The last camera I showed you was just a little bit east of Grand Island. This is further east, about 50 miles further down the highway towards Lincoln, and they are getting those snow showers hitting hard. Now, if we go a little bit further to the east, let's go out towards the Quad Cities. Yeah, there you go. Just a very shallow layer of steep lapse rates, and even some indication of maybe subsidence working on that column. So entirely different profiles from east to west. And that's how it looks on AWIPS, exactly as a Weather Service forecaster would see it. There's those large open cell cumulus fragments across the southern part of the state. 35 degrees here at Omaha, 40. So rather warm, some of that snow obviously coming down with a very cold wet bulb temperatures, but some very significant cooling in the wake of this system. And with this troughing, with this low pressure, implied low pressure area right there, I think we do have some justification for putting a small cold front through Nebraska. Yeah, see those temperatures down to the south in the 40s. So I probably could have placed a front somewhere in here. Not a full synoptic scale front or anything like that, but at least it would be indicated on the surface analysis. So returning to that NAM forecast, yeah, the NAM probably under forecasting some of those snow showers and maybe has it a little bit too far northeast. But let's go into the evening hours. That activity should diminish. We've got that MCS continuing to move into the Carolinas and into Georgia, some possible severe weather across the Florida Panhandle. And then gradually it will move on off to sea, and cold air advection sweeps into the remainder of the eastern U.S. Then we go into tomorrow morning, and you can see that there is a Pacific system working into southwestern Texas, some of that producing some rain and snow mix. So there's some sort of upper level disturbance working eastward through the southern stream. We refer back to the 500 millibar heights and vorticity for Saturday morning, and we don't see a large deep trough. I mean, there is some troughing there, but looks like most of what we have are short waves moving across the flow, just zipping on by. And I think the dominant process here is going to be isentropic lift. We've got that cold dome packing into southwestern Texas right there, and we've got probably southwesterly flow or southeasterly flow at 850, and that's helping to generate lift. This is the 850 millibar temperatures and height on Saturday morning. You can see this little pocket of 0 Celsius at 850 millibars. So as long as you have southerly flow moving out towards that thermal trough at 850, you're going to get lift. And if it's saturated, you're going to get clouds and precip. So by Sunday morning, you can see -2 at 850, so some very cold air still in place just off the surface. And then as the high pressure area moves to the east, that's going to be probably by Monday, we start seeing some warming, very gradual. But by, yeah, see here, by late Monday, already coming up to 4 Celsius. And it just gets warmer and warmer. All that red there, that's going to be warm air advection ahead of that system coming out of the Pacific. And that's all for this edition of Forecast Lab. I forgot to mention it on Wednesday, but I will be taking next week off. That's kind of our scheduled quarterly break, but also some difficult things going on with family in the hospital, so got to take care of that. So we will be back eventually, and if there's any significant severe weather next week, I'll try to do a show for that. Anyway, I hope you all have a great weekend. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.